It's The Real News. I'm Aaron Mate. With less than a month before the British election, Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn has unveiled his party's manifesto.
People want a country run for the benefit of the many, not the few. That's because for the last 7 years, our people have lived through the opposite. A Britain for the rich and the elite and the vested interests. We are clear there is now a choice. Labour Brexit that puts jobs first, or a Tory Brexit that will be geared towards the interests of the City of London and risk making Britain a low-wage tax haven.
Polls show a recent increase in Labour support, but Corbyn's party faces an uphill battle to unseat the Conservatives, led by Prime Minister Theresa May. Joining me now is Thomas Barlow of Real Media, an independent media cooperative in the UK. Thomas, welcome.
Hi there.
Hi. Okay, so the Labour manifesto is called For the Many, Not the Few. And as I understand it, it was leaked to the press beforehand, so people have had some time to process it. How has it been received so far?
Well, it's definitely fired up the base, and whilst the press have predictably attacked it, the attacks haven't landed as much as they maybe thought they would have. They've done some funny front pages, like the Daily Mail has said, we're going to go back to the 1970s, while simultaneously advertising an article that says the success of a long marriage is splitting jobs into girls' jobs and boys' jobs. So we're not quite sure who's going back to the 1970s there. But what we are aware of is the base is fired up, Labour have increased in the polls, that people within the party who dislike Jeremy Corbyn have found at least that they have something to campaign for with the manifesto itself. So the manifesto has actually been a hit, and even though they tried to paint it as the leak as some kind of disaster, actually it's given people time to discuss them, and we're having arguments about things that actually, you know, for 20 years we haven't been able to have discussions about, you know, like making education free, like renationalising the railways, like you know, fully nationalised public services, which are things that are incredibly popular, but we just haven't been allowed to discuss those publicly, and that's something that this manifesto has now put squarely on the agenda.
When you say that the media has predictably attacked the manifesto, can you explain that more? Because people outside of Britain might be unaware of the dynamic going on with Corbyn facing so much heat from the media and from people inside his own party.
Yeah, well, you know, there's a couple of things. First off, the press is owned, 80% of it is owned by 5 billionaires. They produce far-right publications such as the Daily Mail, The Express. Rupert Murdoch, who you're aware of, owns Fox News, started off really building his empire in the UK. So they're predictably antagonistic towards Jeremy Corbyn, who specifically said that he will bring in regulation for the press, because currently the press regulation is being written by Paul Dacre, who is the editor of the Daily Mail and also the publication that has committed the most, has been caught most often breaking previous regulations, most often printing falsehoods. So they're predictably against him, but also the liberal establishment of the BBC and the Guardian, because for 20 years they've been able to talk about personality politics rather than policies or issues. There had been seen to be some kind of consensus around free market economics and liberal economics, and it has been shaken up by Jeremy Corbyn, and there's a lot of people within that establishment who are just, quite frankly, confused as to why he's the leader of the Labour Party, and they are antagonistic towards his programme. They also then have tried to paint him as an ineffective leader, but this ineffectiveness as leader has been to the backdrop of his own parliamentary party and the media establishment consistently attacking him from before he was even elected as the leader. So there has been outright hostility from all elements of the press from the get-go. It's actually during the campaigning time, when there's policies to discuss and ideas to discuss, that Jeremy Corbyn shines the most, and certainly the Labour Party does.
You know, one member of that political establishment that has been hostile to Corbyn is the former Labour Prime Minister, Tony Blair, who has refused to endorse Corbyn, a member of his own party. And what I find funny about the British election is that it's sort of the inverse of what we saw with the Democrats in the recent election. After Bernie Sanders lost to Hillary Clinton in the primary, there was huge pressure on his wing to come out and support and back Hillary at all costs to stop Trump. But now we're seeing a case where in Britain we have a progressive leader up for election, and members of the Clinton-type establishment in Britain, people like Tony Blair, who are more in the center, are refusing to come out in support of the progressive.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, the crazy thing is that no one wants Tony Blair's support. I mean, it would be like Bush support. You know, the Republicans didn't want Bush's support. In the 2008 election, they tried to distance themselves from him. You know, Blair is a contaminated political figure. So every time he attacks Jeremy Corbyn, he actually does Jeremy Corbyn a favour. But yes, absolutely, the liberal establishment, like the corporate Democrats, are completely antagonistic to losing power, while simultaneously not really having anybody with any personality and certainly no policies or ideas that are popular with anyone. They don't really have a direction or set of tactics or strategy, but they know what they're against, and they're against, you know, a progressive platform. Yet, yes, if Jeremy Corbyn had lost, they'd have been absolutely telling all of his supporters and him to fall in line to support the Liberal leader, whoever that would have been, but they do not hold themselves to the same standards that they try and put on other people, and that's, you know, been very evident, and that's something I hope that Americans can learn from, which is that, you know, the calls for unity are really only calls for unity behind a particular perspective, behind a particular politics, behind particular personalities and ways of doing things, that would never be reciprocated.
So, in terms of the platform, again, it's called For the Many, Not the Few. Can you tell us some of the key facets of it that you think are important and that mark a break from previous Labour platforms of the past?
Yes, so I mean, we have a socialised healthcare system like most countries, but not like the US. New Labour under Tony Blair significantly pretty much started the ball rolling on privatising it from within, starting selling services off to private companies. In fact, Real Media will be releasing a report about Simon Stevens, who's the head of United Health in the US, who's also behind a lot of the privatisation from within of the NHS. Now, Labour say under this manifesto they'll reverse that trend, which is good news for people who care about healthcare, because there's better health outcomes under socialised medicine, but also for the taxpayer, because it costs less when the public provides healthcare rather than private companies. Private companies have to make profits, so they either cut back on services or more often charge the NHS more for that. So that, and you know, and there's a couple of vote winners in there, like, you know, not charging people to park in car parks and stuff. But other key ones are rail nationalisation and free tuition fees. We're going back to when I grew up, we had free tuition fees for free university college education, and it was inconceivable to me at the time that you could ever charge people for education. It's a public good. It helps society, and if anyone's got the skill or capability to go to university, they should be able to. Now we're in a situation where our fees are almost as high as the US, and that has been a significant barrier. And again, it actually doesn't save the taxpayer any money, and in the long run it's going to cost us a lot more money. It's going to cost us around about 6 times the amount to the taxpayer. So again, you know, making tuition fees free, renationalising railways, again, all of these save taxpayers money and provide better services. So, and all of these things have been popular with different segments of the population. Now, we are having to have the debates, well, is it costed? Can it work? You know, are we all going to have to pay more tax? What Labour have clearly promised is that under £80,000, anyone earning under £80,000 will see no tax increases whatsoever. That includes VAT. The Conservatives have always put up VAT, and they've said they'll probably do it again. And that is value-added tax, which is a sales tax, which everyone has to pay. Whereas, but they've cut corporation tax. The inverse is true. Corporation tax will go up under Labour, and taxes for the rest of us will remain where they are. So it's good news for everyone, and very much something that a lot of people can get behind and can enjoy discussing. These are interesting debates right now.
Okay, Thomas, so the question is will this be enough to swing the election? I mentioned the polls earlier. I believe right now Labour is at its highest point in the polls since the start of this campaign. But will policy be enough to shift the election towards Corbyn to unseat Theresa May and the Conservatives?
Quite frankly, no, I don't think so. The problems are multiple. Even if Corbyn gets above where Tony Blair was in 2005, when he won a significant victory, around about 35% of the vote, what we have is a new political force in UK, UKIP, who far-right nationalists who sort of fought for Brexit. Their vote is collapsing completely, and it's going to the Conservatives, across the board. So the Conservatives are picking up there, an extra 10% of the vote. So even if Corbyn does well, he's above where Miliband was in 2015, he'll probably get to where Tony Blair was in 2005, around 35%. That would be a significant achievement, especially for policies that are quite different to ones Labour pushed. But we have a problem that there has been a widespread nationalist discourse for 30 years, especially about anti-immigration, about borders, and that has found traction in a part of the populace that always votes, the over 60s, and the press holds significant sway in marginal constituencies, in those swing seats with over 60-year-olds, and it will be those people who make up the swing towards the Conservatives in this election, and they will ensure probably a quite considerable Conservative victory. However, what this does set up is 5 years of engaged discussion around policy, around the future of this country. And even though the Conservatives will probably do some things that a lot of the younger generation and people generally don't want to see, it's going to set the nation back quite considerably, it's not going to be without resistance, and it's certainly going to start exacerbating a generational divide. And what we will see is over the next 5 years, a few million new young people come into the electorate and old people disappear out of the electorate, and maybe there will be a change over 5 years. So it's been an important change, but it's not going to win the election, I don't think.
Well, all the more reason why journalism during this period will be paramount. And Thomas, we thank you for your journalism and for joining us today on The Real News.
Thank you very much for having me.
And thank you for joining us on The Real News.